that you'd be amenable to?
The Senate isn't broken and doesn't need fixing.
So many of your members have started wearing masks, and you started wearing a mask in the hallways. Do you think that that's something that everyone on Capitol Hill should be doing right now, given the surge of Omicron cases?
Well, I think more people are wearing masks because of the Omicron surge, and I think everybody makes that assessment personally. And each office is conducting their affairs in a way that I think recognizes that we're in the middle of a surge. So I wouldn't advocate a kind of one-size-fits-all approach to it, but I do think more people are responding to the surge by wearing more masks.
The big news this weekend is your number 2, John Thune, said he's going to run for re-election. It sparked some discussion about the future of the Republican leadership. Have you given any thought to how long you want to serve as Republican leader?
I'm going to be running again for leader later this year. Yeah.
I want to talk to you about getting kids back into school. Some have questioned the Biden administration not having a plan. And Senator Blunt, you had actually written a letter to the Department of Education advising them to get kids back into school.
Yeah, Roy, you want to address that?
Well, Senator Burr, who is the top Republican on the authorizing committee, I'm the top Republican on the appropriating committee, and I wrote a letter to the Secretary of Education expressing our concern that all of the indications are that kids don't do as well not going to school in most cases as they do going to school. Kids have gotten behind in math and in reading and in other things. The Secretary of Education, actually in his former job in Connecticut, was an incredible advocate for getting kids back to school. I hope he can be the same kind of advocate for getting kids back to school all over the country.
Have you heard anything back?
Well, we sent the letter Friday.
Everything. First of all, the Voting Rights Act is intact and doesn't expire for a number of years. The current John Lewis bill is about a whole lot of other things unrelated to the Voting Rights Act, which passed in 1965 and is still the law of the land.
Let me also say there, if I could, Leader, that the Voting Rights Act, and I voted to extend the Voting Rights Act and would again, the Voting Rights Act was 12 pages. The John Lewis Act, you can call it whatever you want to, but it's way beyond the Voting Rights Act. The John Lewis bill, and John Lewis and I served together. I have the highest respect for him. Naming it for him is a smart thing because he was a hero in the civil rights effort. But that Voting Rights Act is so far beyond the Voting Rights Act that has served the country well that it's an election takeover. You can call it whatever you want to, but it's a 200-page election takeover, not a 12-page Voting Rights Act that points to the constitutional amendments and the law and says here's the way these need to be enforced.
Well, what I've said about the Electoral Count Act is that that's actually related to what happened on January 6th of 2021. It obviously has some flaws, and I think it should be discussed. That is a totally separate issue from what they're peddling on the Democratic side this week. And I think that those who are involved in those discussions ought to take a while, make sure we get it right. But I think it does warrant being addressed and hopefully can be addressed on a bipartisan